Today we'll be solving May June 2023 paper 2-3 15-mark question, and this is quite a technical question. In fact, one of the most difficult ones we have had so far in the 15-mark scenario questions. So let's go through it and we'll plan and visualize the problem accordingly. So we have a 2D array called contacts. It is used to store names and telephone numbers. All the data is stored as strings, and the array must have the capacity to store 100 contacts in this form. So there are two columns. One should be only with the names, last name and first name, like this. Last names, comma separated by the first name, and the second one would be telephone numbers. Telephone numbers are usually stored as text, okay, until and unless they tell you that they're stored as an integer form. Otherwise, we'll assume it to be a string. The reason is they often contain something like +92 or 111-00022, something like that. Okay, then we have a variable called current size that will show us how many contacts are in the array. Okay, so these are the active contacts. If you open your contact app on your phone, so you'll also see a count of the contacts that have been synced. So it's the same thing. Okay, so these are the active contacts that we have in the array right now. We need to write a program that meets the following requirements. Display a menu of choices. So first of all, we'll have to add new contact details, then display, and then delete. Okay, so add, view, and delete in very simple terms. We need to validate the menu input. That means that this should all be done inside a loop until correct option is selected from either 1, 2, or 3. Then allow up to a maximum of 5 new contacts, new contacts to be added to the array at any one time. Alright, so this is important. You can only add a maximum of 5 contacts in one go, not more than that. Do not allow more than 100 contacts into. Just we'll stop here and look at the maths. So let's say if the current size is equal to 96 and you try to add new 5 contacts, which would become equal to 101. So this should not be allowed. Okay, so what we have to do is that every time we ask the user to input how many contacts they're going to add, we will add that number with the current size. Let's say user says 4, this becomes 100, and we make sure that if the value is less than or equal to 100, only then we will allow that many contacts. But let's say if the current size is equal to 99 and the user says I will add 2 more contacts, then this should be not allowed. Okay, so this is very important maths that you have to look at. Then after new contacts have been added, sort the array by the contact name as long as there are at least 2 contacts. So this should be an if condition, and sorting the array by contact name, here we are going to use the bubble sort. So this is one of the few questions in which we are expected to write complete bubble sort for a 2D array from memory, not from memory, from your understanding, because we are not memorizing the code. Then we should be outputting the whole of the array, and then we are supposed to delete the contents of the array if the user wants. And by deletion, we simply mean that we set all contents to empty string, because we cannot technically delete a value of the array, otherwise it will end up changing the size of the array, and you cannot do that. Alright, so you must use either pseudocode, or you do not need to declare any arrays, and the messages must be suitable for input output. You do not need to initialize the arrays that are contact and the variable current size. Alright, so the question is one of the most precise and most short questions that we have till date in 15-mark question, but its implementation is quite lengthy and quite tedious, and we'll see why. Now let's look at the visualization of this program that we should do. So we will have a 2D array of contacts which looks something like this. We have the first column that contains the names of the contacts, and the second column which contains the numbers. Okay, so they clearly told us in the question that the numbers have to be sorted by the contact names. And one very big mistake that students make in such a question of 2D array bubble sorting is that they simply end up switching the names, and then they forget that they also have to switch the numbers as well. Okay, like this. This is the right bubble sorting that you have to do. Okay, so you need to, so if you're swapping Harry Potter with Darth Vader, you also need to switch their numbers. So they both swap, and these two need to be swapped as well. So the bubble sorting that we do on 1D array should be done twice in this case, one for the column 1 and one for the column 2. And just a quick recap that we can technically compare strings in pseudocode. Let's say if I write if zebra is greater than apple. So this would return us true because Z comes after the A in the alphabet. And if we do the reverse, then that would be false because A comes before the Z in the alphabet. Let's begin. First of all, we are told that we have to display this menu, and we should allow the user to stop at some point. Okay, let's say if they do not want to continue any further. So maybe we can put this whole program inside a while. So we can say initially, let's say status is equal to true, and then we can say while status. You can either write true like this, or you can just leave it like this. It means the same thing. Now we are going to tell the user that they have multiple options and they have to choose one from. So output, enter one. So one for new context. The better option is always to give the user a choice to select an integer option, okay, so they don't have to type one, and because typing is always more prone to mistake. Then output two for view all contexts. Is that what the question said? Yes, display and delete. Then output three, delete all contexts, and maybe we can have an exit option as well. So you can say 4 exit program. All right, fair enough till this point. Then they're saying that you need to validate the menu. So validation, always this word validate means that you must use a loop and you cannot allow the user to choose any invalid option. So we'll use a while loop or a repeat until here, totally up to you. So we'll take the input from the user, input, let's say selection. You can choose any name of your choice. So while selection is less than 1 or selection is more than 4. Why? Because we only have options from 1 to 4. So if a user decides to choose one of the invalid options, then you are supposed to take the input again. And if you don't write this line, the while loop goes in an infinite loop, because this will only ensure that the selection remains the same. Let's say you entered selection as 0 here, so this will keep on checking it for 0 infinite times. So we need to take input after every single input. So here we validate the user input, and here we are outputting menu to use. All right, then the question says that if you are going to ask the user to add new values, add new contacts in the array, then first you need to check if the contacts list is already full or not, and secondly you need to make sure that if they add 5 contacts in one go, so that should not exceed the total of 100. Okay, so we have to do two checks here. First of all, check if array is full, or check if there is space in context array. So how do we do that? We simply check the size. So we say if selection is equal to 1, that means user selected add new contact option and current size is equal to 100 already. Again, they have said that the current size is already initialized. You do not need to initialize this. So we will assume that there is an arbitrary value already in the current size, maybe 5, maybe 6, we don't mind, and it does not affect our functionality. So we'll output context, no space, delete, no space left. This is fine. Then in the second scenario, we will be looking at this maximum of 5 new contacts to be added to the array at one time. Okay, so here we need to check that user is first selecting a valid value between 1 to 5. Secondly, whatever value they input, if it is added with the current size, it should not exceed 100. So this part I'm talking about that we discussed in the start. So current size plus the new contact count that they want to add should not be more than 100. So if selection is again equal to 1 and current size is less than 100, okay, so let's say there is space. Now you want to ask the user to input how many contacts they want to add. So which should always be between 1 to 5. So here we need to validate. Validate new contact count. And again, by validation we mean between 1 to 5 there should be a loop. So repeat, or you can use while until. Okay, so in repeat we'll ask how many new contacts you want to add, and then they will maybe write new contact count. Again, you can use any variable names that you like, not there's no restriction here. So then you'll say new contact count until and unless this value is between 1 and 5, that is 1. So new contact count to be in range of 1 to 5 and total contacts less than 100 at max 100. Okay, so we need to check both conditions here. Until the new contact is greater than 0 and the new contact count is less than or equal to 5. This is one condition. The second condition is this one, that the user, whatever input count that they use, you need to add that in the current size and make sure that it is not more than 100. So you can say we add the new contact count in the current size and we make sure it is less than 101 or less than equal to 100. Let's say the new contact count was inputted to be 5. The current size was set to maybe 97 or 98. So when we add these two values together, this clearly becomes more than 100, or you can just say less than or equal to 100. So this should not be allowed. But let's say if the initial current size was 91, so 91 plus 95 is a valid number, 96. So then this should be allowed. This is the reason for this condition. With this we validate. All right, then we need to add new details. Now going back to the question, we are done with the first part, enter new contact details. And now we need to allow the user to actually input the details into this array. So let's say if we have current size set to maybe 6 right now, so whatever new contact the user wants to input will go here. So let's say the new is maybe Jack Samurai, and here we'll have some sort of their number, and then the current size would tell us, okay, we so far have 6 new contacts. All right, so I'll just get rid of it. Going back, so with this we validated that the user will select the right option, and now we are going to add new contact details in array. Okay, for this what do we need to do? We need to ask the user to input the contact name, and we need to ask the user to input the number of the contact, and then we can just directly input it at the first column and at the second column of the current size. So as I said, let's assume that the current size tells us that we have 5 contacts right now, okay, like this. If you want to add a new contact, you simply increment the value of current size to the 6th index, and then at the first column you input the name, and at the second column you input the contact number. So that is exactly what we're going to do now. So to add a new contact, we will ask the user to let's say output enter contact name, and then we'll say input contact name, and then output enter contact number, and we say input contact number, and then we can just directly place it in the array. We do not need to loop through the array because we already know where we are going to insert the new value in the array. Okay, so there is no point of iterating through the array one by one. We can directly put it in the first column, second column based on the current size row. So we can say, first of all, we'll increment the current size by 1 to make sure that we go to the next available slot in the contacts array, and then we are going to save contact details by saying contacts current size comma 1. This would save the name like this. Okay, so here we get Jack Samurai, and then contacts current size column 2. Here we will save the number, and this should be something like this. And with this we have successfully added a new contact. Now the next part says, after new contacts have been added, sort the array by the contact name as long as there are at least 2 contacts in the array. Okay, so first let's check. Here we are going to now sort, bubble sort contacts based on name. So if the current size is greater than 2, now at this part we are going to do some bubble sorting. Okay, so how do we bubble sort? Well, let's do this at the end. I'll just leave this for now. Let's do the easier part first. Then it says you need to output the contents of the whole array, and then you should be able to delete the contents of the whole array, and we should be able to exit the program as well, since we gave the option as well. And you can just simply set the status to false, and then the loop will end. So let's do that first. Display all context maybe. Also, you could have done this using function and procedures as well. The benefit of that would have been that the program would have looked a little bit tidier and more easy to comprehend, but it would have gotten a bit technical and difficult as well. So we are just writing the whole code in one block. So if selection is equal to, this is the second option, is equal to 2, we want to output the whole 2D array. So we simply do that, and for that we need to use a nested loop, because this is a 2D array. We have columns and rows, so we can do row by row, first row, first column, then second column, so on and so forth. It would make more sense instead of just printing the first column and then the second column. So for row 1 2, so the current size, this will be dictating the number of rows, and for column equal to 1 to 2, we only have 2 columns, and then we can just output name and contact number comma contacts comma row comma column. So what will happen is, next call, next row, and if. So what will happen is that initially row would be set to 1 and column would be set to 1. So this will output Potter Harry, and then the inner loop column would become 2, and this would output 999 1 2 3 4 5 6. Then from here we go to next row becomes 2, and then the value of column again becomes 1. So the value that will be output would be Darth Vader, and then column would become 2, and then the number outputted would be 999 tetra 4, etc. All right, so simple and straightforward. So this is how we display all the contacts. Then to delete all contacts, as the question said, output the whole content of the array and then delete the contents of the array. So if the user chooses to delete, that would be the last option. So if selection is equal to 3, So what we need to do is we simply need to put empty string in all of the contexts. And for that, I'll just copy paste the code from above, next row, next column. And instead of outputting, I'll just say context row comma column is equal to empty, like not equal to arrow sign. Okay, so this will just simply delete all the contents of the array and replace them with empty strings like this. So this is the easy part is all done now. And yes, the last part, let's end of this. And yes, we should set the current size to 0 as well, because we have resetted the whole array. And then the last part, exit program. Okay, now exit program, we decided that we set the status to true initially. So if we set it to false here, this loop will not run because the condition would be terminated. So we can just simply do that. So if selection is equal to 4, you just set the status to false, and then you end if, and then you end while like this. So again, easy part is done. Now let's do the difficult part. As I said, we have to do bubble sorting, but on two things now. The first bubble sorting would be done on this name column, and then the same procedure would be repeated for the second column, that would be the contact number. So what we need to do is, when we are replacing, so in bubble sort what we do is we swap the values. If they are out of order, we make a copy of one of the values in another variable, and then we replace it. So I am going to save this Darth Vader here, and then I'll replace the Harry Potter with it, and then I'll bring back the Darth Vader from the temporary variable. So they are swapped. Now I need to do the same thing for their numbers. So I will create a copy of this number for Darth Vader, then I will replace it and then bring back the number from the copy. So these are the easy steps that you have to do. Now the writing of the code is the difficult part. So for the bubble sorting, what we need to do is we need to write a nested loop again, because we are going through each row and then we are going through each column, and then we need to check if the current row value is out of order in comparison to the next row. If that is the case, then we make the copy of the value and then we swap, and similarly we will make the copy of this value and then we'll swap them as well. All right, so let's try to write this. So again, this would be a nested loop for row 1 to current size, and then for columns 1 to 2, and at this point we'll compare, check if not, if name not in order. So since they did not tell us the order, we'll assume that this should be in ascending order by default. So we'll say if context row comma column is greater than context row plus 1. This should not be columns. In fact, this should be 1, and this should be also 1. In fact, we don't even need to look at the column. We have two columns. We know for sure that these values would be swapped. So we don't need to go through the each value inside the nested loop. Okay, we just need to look at the row. If these values are out of order, then we definitely know that the second column values would be replaced. So we do not need the nested loop just in this case. Otherwise, it is usually needed. So if row first column is greater than row plus 1 in the first column. Okay, now what does it mean? So this might get a little confusing, so I'll use some numbers here. So currently the value of row would be 1 initially, so we are saying context 1 comma 1, and since row is 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2, so 2 comma 1. We are saying that first row first column, that is Darth Vader, is it greater than the second row first column? So we are looking at Harry Potter now, and you can clearly see that Vader is alphabetically after Potter, so they are out of order. So we need to swap them now. Okay, so this is the first check that we have to do. I'll remove this afterwards, just to just keeping it here for the sake of understanding. Okay, so now at this point we need to save details before swapping. Save details before swapping. Okay, now we can have any two variables, temporary variables. You can call them whatever you want. Maybe let's call them temp name and then temp number, like this. So in the temp name, we will save, since Darth Vader has to go down, maybe we can save this value in the variable, the copy of it, or we can also save the copy of Harry Potter. It's totally up to you, whatever approach is convenient for you. So I'll go with this first value. So I'll make a copy of this. Let's call this temp name, and on this side we'll have temp number. So in the temp name, I'm going to save Vader Dart. So I'll save it is at the current row, that is the first row. Okay, I've clearly labeled these first row and this is the second row. So I'm going to save the value. I'm going to say context current row first column. That means we are going to save Vader Dart in the temp name. Okay, we need to do the same thing now for the number. So we go at the second column of the same row. So now I'm saying first row second column, first row second column, save this in the temp number. This is what we have done so far. Nothing fancy. We are just saving the copy here. Now we are going to swap contact names. Since they are out of order, the current contact name is out of order in comparison to the next one, so we have to swap them. So in swapping, we are just going to bring the second value. Since we saved the copy of the first one, we can bring the second one and we can overwrite it. So I'll bring Potter Harry and I'll replace it with Darth Vader. The value in the second row, I'll bring it, the name in the second row, and I'll replace it with the first one, overwrite it. So how do we write this in code? I'll say context current row first column. That means, again, current row first column, I'm going to overwrite this value by the value in the second row first column. So context row plus 1 comma 1. So second row Potter comma Harry, I bring this and I overwrite it in the first row first column. Okay, this is done. Now I should also do the same thing for the contact number, but we can do it separately. First, let's bring back the Darth Vader now. Now we had saved the Darth Vader in the temp name, and the right place for it to go is in the second row, that is row plus 1. So I'll say contacts first column should now contain temp name. So what did I do? I said bring this temp name that we had saved and put it in the second row first column, which contains the name, and now we have Darth Vader here, and this has the values have been swapped seamlessly. Okay, now we need to do the same thing for swapping the contact numbers. So for that we need to do the same procedure. Now we had already saved the temp number of Darth Vader in this, so we now need to swap. Okay, so what do? We'll say contacts row comma 2. What I'm trying to do here now is that I'll bring this value, the value in the second row, which originally belonged to Harry Potter, in the first one. So that is what we have to do. We are bringing the value in the second row in the first one. So here I'll say context get the value from the second row from the second column. So this value, bring it and overwrite it over the first row second column. Again, just substitute these values here arbitrarily so you understand what is going on here. And then now we need to bring back this number that get saved temporarily for Darth Vader, right? So we copied this number here, and now we need to bring back this temp number which correctly belong to Darth Vader, and we'll say context row plus 1 column 2 should be temp number. Again, what did I do? I said row plus 1 meant the second row. This is the second row that we're talking about, and in the second row second column bring back the temp number. In the second row second column bring back the temp number which was saved here before, and this will be the correct swapping. All right, and just let's finish this. So I'll get rid of these now, and this should be end if. Then we have next row, and then we have end if, and this is it. With this we have successfully completed the bubble sorting as well of this part, and the whole question is done now. Again, a little bit difficult, but I hope you guys understood it. That's the end of the question. Thank you.